Oh, so you really don't think that the paperboard is
Yeah.
He calls them out on it. Don't tell me how much.
We gotta make sure that yeah, but all those social workers would lose their jobs.
Because they want to make so much work.
I'm not a big fan of picking that team. It's already losing badly. That team's already losing pretty badly.
Okay, folks, it's 7:30. And once again, for those who may have come in late, my name is Brad Hessel. I am the treasurer of the Wake County Libertarian Party. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And we have a special program, as you probably know, some of you, at least most of you know, the chair of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina, Brian Irving, has been very active with respect to scouting out the activities of the North Carolina General Assembly, which, as most of you probably know, has reconvened. And there are a lot of interesting potential things they might do this year, some of which we actually like, many of which we don't like so much. And in either event, obviously we would like our influence to be as felt as strongly as possible. So Brian is going to talk about what those initiatives are, A, and B, potentially what we might be able to do to hopefully influence things to go in the right direction and make life better for everybody in North Carolina, especially, not necessarily especially us, but us in particular. So without any further ado.
Okay, yeah, like Brett says, I kind of, much to my discretion, I kind of follow what the General Assembly is doing. You can get updates whenever bills are filed. After the first or second day, it's almost impossible to keep up with the number of bills that are filed. Just today, one representative filed 5 bills in 1 day. So I kind of look at the titles and I read what I'll be honest with you, I read what the News Observer points out. Carolina Journal, I get that as well. So I kind of use those as guides. So anyway, I kind of look at there's so much BS. It's almost impossible for anybody who doesn't do it full time to really keep track of what's going on. But a couple of things have ahead that I think are important for libertarians. The first of which, now this is not actually a bill yet, but
Ryan, we really can't hear you too well on this side.
Pardon?
We can't hear you.
I can't hear you either.
It's fair then.
The first thing that I thought of, it's not actually a bill yet, but on March 1st, next Wednesday, there's a group called End Gerrymandering Now, which is going to hold a citizens lobbying day at the legislature from 9 o'clock to the afternoon. Right? Now, End Gerrymandering Now is kind of a conglomerate of different organizations. I think the primary group is Common Cause. In the last session of the, I'll give you the short version of gerrymandering. We all know gerrymandering sucks. Right? We all know that it's designed by the establishment parties to maintain their power. There have been several attempts over the years in North Carolina to reform the way we do the redistricting. In the last session of the General Assembly, and the reason for that is the last election was a perfect example. 30% of the legislative seats, the candidate had no primary or general election opposition, 30%. 40% of the districts, they had no opposition in the general election. So, and in 91% of the districts, the General Assembly, the race was decided by 10% or more. And this goes across party lines. There's almost an equal number of Democratic and Republican districts that basically have a 10% margin. So there's only a very small percentage, about 7 or 8%, of the districts are actually contested. Fair. Contested. And none of the congressional districts, all the congressional districts are so heavily gerrymandered in favor of one of the two parties that it's impossible for anybody from the other party to. In the last session of the General Assembly, there was a bill introduced to change the way North Carolina does redistricting. There are different models used in different states, but they picked one state, Iowa. For some reason, they picked Iowa. And in Iowa, they turned the redistricting process over to an agency of the state legislature. And these people are the ones that actually draw the districts using computer models and certain criteria. One person, one vote. They have to conform with the federal Civil Rights Acts and Voting Rights Acts. They draw the districts. They come up with a plan. They present it to the General Assembly. The General Assembly, or the state legislature, I don't know what's called in Iowa, has the opportunity to vote it up or down. Can't make any changes. They have 3 chances to do that. If they don't like the first plan, they send it back. This group redraws the lines. They try the second time. If after 3 tries they don't have something they like, then the legislature themselves go ahead and do the redistricting. Now, in Iowa, they've never had any of the plans rejected, nor have they had any lawsuits. Now, granted, Iowa is a much smaller state. If you look at the map of the districts, they're basically all rectangles. You know, it's pretty easy to draw a line when you have pretty much, just everybody's over here and the rest of the state's pretty vacant. But it is a model that's used, and similar models are used in other states. Are very interesting. So for whatever reason, they picked this model, and they had 63 members of the House sign on to the bill, Democrats and Republicans. That's a majority. The bill never saw the light of day.
This is back in North Carolina now.
And there was no hearing. It just was sent to a committee and died. Okay. So I'm told they're going to be introducing a similar bill, or maybe the same exact bill again, probably with the same number of sponsors. It's interesting that when the Republicans were in the minority, several of the people who are currently Republican leaders were very vocal in complaining about the way the Democrats were gerrymandering the districts. The Senate President, Phil Berger, sponsored 5 reform bills when he was in the minority, when he was part of the minority party. The Speaker of the House sponsored 4 reform bills when he was in the minority. And these 2 individuals in particular have the power to determine which bills get heard. That's just forget about popular pressure and letters to the editor and calls. There are 2 people, maybe 3, in the General Assembly that actually make the decision about which bills get heard. The Speaker of the House and the President pro tem of the Senate. Not the Lieutenant Governor, who's technically the presiding officer. So the point of these kind of citizen lobbies is just to put pressure on them. So what the group is asking you to do, you can go to the website. It's called End Gerrymandering Now.com. End Gerrymandering Now.com. I can give you that right if you need it. Go to their website, sign up. They do ask you, and I ask you, if you show up 9 o'clock in the legislative building, you go in the main doors, you go to your left. There's like a courtyard inside where you can sign up. I do ask you to kind of dress business casual. And when you go, they're going to have an opportunity for us to meet with the Wake County delegation to the General Assembly. So there'll be an opportunity to do that. If you have any particular legislators that you know, then you go out on your own to kind of meet them. It does make you do make a point just by showing up, going to an office, whether they're there or not. the person that's there, the secretary, the legislative assistant, will make a record of you being there. So it does help. That's probably the most effective way of reaching out to legislators. It's physically going to the General Assembly. And it's a difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Yes, as libertarians, why should we care about gerrymandering? Is it because without it, we'd have a better chance to elect more libertarians? Why should we care?
We should care because the way it's done now, it's deliberately done by the establishment parties that maintain their power. The districts are not equal at all. And when you have when you have half the legislature unopposed, it's because the establishment parties don't see that they have any chance of being elected. So if it did, and we should care because the largest growing group of voters in North Carolina aren't Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians. They're unaffiliated people who are fed up with the two-party system. And so that's why we should care.
I think you have a point that the appearance of inequity is actually may help us as libertarians. That appearance of inequity may help us. It allows us to have a wedge issue. Even though in the end, gerrymandering may help us, which I think, David, that's something.
Well, I don't think gerrymandering helps at all.
Well,
because distance will be, if the current system continues, there's no reason in hell in the 21st century in an area, a state that prides itself on technological advancements, that they can't use a simple computer model to come up with districts. There's no reason in hell why we should have a congressional district that goes along the lines of that.
Yeah, yeah. That's not the problem. The technology's there. It's just being misused.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So we should care because it's basically the way the two establishment parties maintain their power.
Yeah,
By creating districts that are going to be, and it's even though the Republicans are the majority and the Democrats are the ones that are swinging the foul, if the tables reversed, it would be the same thing. And in the reality, my opinion is there's collusion between the two parties. They're perfectly happy to have certain districts. In Durham County, all of the legislative seats were unopposed, all of them, and they're all Democratic seats. It used to be similar to Wake, but Wake was a little bit more mixed. There's some Republicans.
Can I take a stab at answering Hal's question?
No, I think we answered it. I think you answered it.
Well, I just wanted to add something because I've worked on this. Part of why it makes a difference is because there's a perception by a lot of young people who are mostly unaffiliated, as he said, and they're turned off to both the Democratic and the Republican Party. There's unfortunately a misperception or a perception that the Libertarian Party only cares about 3 or 4 issues. And getting involved in things beyond those issues, such as gerrymandering, which upsets people depending on, it upsets the Democrats and it upsets Republicans depending on who was in charge. It builds an interest in the party that is not just interested in those 3 or 4
And to us, gerrymandering is similar to this ballot access. I would say that the real unfairness of the election system is the fact that it's so difficult for third parties and independent candidates to get out the ballot. Gerrymandering is just another way of the two parties maintaining that. I got a few other bills I want to talk about.
Oh,
yeah, but move on. But so again, I would say if you show up for this, please use the talking points they give you. If you have other issues about gerrymandering and redistricting,
can you talk to who they are? Who is sponsoring this? Is it Common Cause?
End Gerrymandering Now.
Is that a Common Cause organization?
I think it's basically Common Cause, but there's a group called that Joan Pinsky is head of.
That would be Common Cause, probably.
Yeah, but the group is called End Gerrymandering. End Gerrymandering Now. It's interesting because the John Locke Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, supports this idea. Civitas, which is also conservative, doesn't like this idea. So it's not a conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat issue. And one of the comments always made is I try to say that we're trying to make the redistricting process as non-political as possible. It's always going to be political, no matter what happens, because it's politicians that are doing it. But you can make it fairer and simpler. And you can prevent, North Carolina has 30 plus lawsuits in its history when the Democrats came up with a redistricting plan, it was inevitably challenged in the courts by the Republicans, and now the Republicans in charge, the same thing's happening. 30 plus lawsuits. I don't know how many lawsuits are going on right now because I've lost track. Because of some of the election law changes that the Republicans are trying to make.
So tomorrow night there is an event. Cynthia Ball and John Locke will be having a panel discussion about gerrymandering.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And David's going to go because she was his opponent last time.
Yeah.
I hope to be there.
Yeah.
If you want to go find out more about what's going on.
It's technically a town hall meeting for the 49th district, but that anybody's welcome to come. It's at Beth Meyer Synagogue, which is on Newton Road, between Six Forks and Falls of Neuse or Wake Forest, whatever it is up there.
That way you can get educated before you go do some lobbying.
Well, yeah. All right. The next bill I came up with, or actually David came up with, it's HB 63, which increased the brewery limit. We've been talking about that.
67.
67?
I swear to Christmas, I promise you it's right.
Okay, 67. You're right. 67.
I know little, but what I know, I know.
Okay, basically, right now, craft brewers are limited in how much beer they can produce. If they go over a certain amount, then they have to turn their distribution of their beverages over to big distributors. That's the state monopoly that the big distributors have. Craft brewing has boomed in North Carolina. It's created hundreds of thousands of jobs, more than billions of dollars. And so the WakeLP is going to be championing this issue. So you're going to hear a lot more about that. But that's another bill to watch. It does have, it's another one of those bipartisan, it has Democrats and Republicans supporting it.
What does it do?
It increased the limit on the amount of beer that a brewer can produce. You raise the limit to
100,000 from 25,000,
Right now it's 25,000.
which is a step in the right direction.
Barrels?
Huh?
Barrel's 31.
Again, it's a step in the right direction and achievable.
I think the guy
We're
in-
focusing on the
guy
bill
in-
that's actually been presented. We don't have our own general statement. You know, it's take the win you can get.
The next bill is HB 3. I'm sure about that. A bill on eminent domain. This is another bill. North Carolina is running. This is a bill to put a provision in the state constitution defining eminent domain in North Carolina. North Carolina it may be the only state, but it's one of the few states where there's no mention of use of eminent domain in the state constitution. It's in the statutes, but it's not in the state constitution. The bill would specifically use the language public use, not public purpose. There's a legal difference. Public use means if you're going to take my land, you got to make a city park, you got to build a road, you got to put a fire station there or a police station. It has to be a government use. You can't take my property and turn it over to a commercial developer so he can build condos. This movement started as a direct result of the Keller decision, which, by the way, President Trump, I think, did, where they took this woman's property in order to build a parking lot or something, and they still haven't built it. So the statutes in North Carolina do provide some relief for people, but it's not in the state constitution. This is another bill that has historically been popular across party lines. It's been sponsored by a number of people across party lines. It has passed the House several times. A bill putting eminent domain for public use only in the state constitution has passed the House 3 or 4 times and died in the state Senate. Another reason why we should be concerned about gerrymandering, because we've got to break the deadlock in the legislature. The latest iteration of it was passed by the Senate 104 to 9. And the 9 opposing votes were all from Democrats. I don't understand that at all, but So, okay, moving along. There are two bills regarding partisan elections. And this one, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if we should care about it or not. But one of the bills, which is I think going to be voted on in the House in the next couple of days, would make basically district and superior court races partisan. In effect, even though the judges in North Carolina are elected in nonpartisan races, you know that the Democrats and Republicans endorse candidates. It's pretty well known who the Republican and Democratic judges are. But officially, they're nonpartisan races. The party label doesn't appear on the ballot. So basically the Republican majority is pushing for making all the court races partisan. That's one bill. There's a second bill, and I love the way these guys name bills. It's called election transparency, but it would make all elections in North Carolina, down to your Board of Education, partisan races. I did not see anything for soil and water conservation. I wouldn't be surprised. It makes all races down to city councils partisan races. It's called. This is because people need to have a party label in order to identify. John Smith was running for Raleigh City Council. Otherwise, they have no idea what he stands for if they don't know he's a Democrat or Republican. That's the reason for the bill. It would make, and again, I'm not sure if we really should care because in reality, these races, although they're nonpartisan, the media generally talks about who are the Republicans and who are the Democrats. I just think it's just another. If I can think of a good reason to argue against it, I will propose that the party be opposed to it. I haven't thought of it. And there's too much other good stuff going on. And the last thing is, just yesterday or the day before, one representative introduced 4 bills, all of which are constitutional amendments. And it's the same gentleman, Michael Speciale, who introduced the bill lifting the crack brew. But the first bill he introduced, or one of the bills he introduced, House Bill 147, in the North Carolina State Constitution, Article 1, Section 4 says, this state shall ever remain a member of the American Union. The people thereof are part of the American nation. There is no right on the part of this state to secede. And all attempts from whatever source or upon whatever pretext to dissolve this union or to sever this nation shall be resisted with the whole power of the state.
I guess Rick Perry's not eligible to run for governor here.
So, Speciale's proposed amendment is to remove that provision from the state constitution. Basically, an anti-secession provision. It is my understanding, and I may be wrong on this, that this particular provision was put into the state constitution following the unpleasantness of the 1860s, the war between the states and Civil War, whatever you want to call it. I believe that was part of the requirement that North Carolina and several other subdivisions add this provision to the state. I may be wrong on that, but I seem to remember learning that back in the Yankee school in the 60s. That's the first one, and that, of course, is getting all the media. Huh? It's okay for California to secede, but God forbid North Carolina secede. The next one is HB 148, which would repeal in the state constitution. I didn't actually get a quote on this, but Article 6, Section 4 says, in order to vote, you have to be able to read and write a section of the Constitution. That provision, again, that's a segregationist provision. We put in there to prevent blacks from voting. And it has never been enforced. But what I'm reading about it says it's never been enforced. It's been basically a violation of federal law. So his constitutional amendment will remove that section.
Who can object to that?
Right, somebody will, I'm sure.
That's a housekeeping thing.
Okay. The next one should be a very good. It's HB 46. And this, again, would amend the state constitution, Article 1, Section 4. There's a line in the state constitution that says that North Carolina citizens owes paramount allegiance to the Constitution and government of the United States. That's what it says in the state constitution. Specialities amendment would remove and government. So we owes paramount allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. I can support that. That's it. And then the last amendment proposed there's a Article 1, Section 30 of the state constitution. Article 1 of the state constitution is essentially Bill of Rights. And Section 30 talks about the right to bear arms. But at the end of it, it says that the state can regulate concealed carry. And Specialities Amendment would remove that. Remove the ability of the state to regulate.
That's the one we've been hearing about recently.
Well, there's also another bill. There's a
So
separate
there's
bill.
two.
There's another bill that would change the statute to remove that.
So that one's worth lobbying for.
But now, the reason I stayed away, the reason I didn't mention this as this is a nice bill. It's something for us to know about. But there are plenty of organizations that advocate for gun rights. I don't think we need even those. But it's just interesting that he had. The other one is a Constitutional Carry Act. And just to give you an idea how weird it is, just as I was getting ready to leave to come here, there's been another bill introduced in the state constitution. And I know this is something libertarians don't even want to talk about, but it basically would put in the state constitution a provision that life begins at conception. And I actually read it, the wording that the representative wants to include, and it makes absolutely no sense from either a scientific or moral standpoint. But she basically is trying to put into the state constitution that life begins at conception or some moment in time. I think is the exact term to use. And it includes cloning.
Just two babies are humans.
Now, so that's just. But this is just a perfect example, and it's the lead story on the News and Observer website.
Does it cover artificial intelligence?
So there'll probably be more coming. So I'll try to keep everybody posted, but my main thing is to, the state party is definitely going to take a stand on the craft, well, we've already taken a stand on the craft room. David wrote an op-ed, sent it out. We are on record as being in favor of a nonpartisan, independent redistricting process. We're open to how that's done. There's other options out there. So that's an official state position. And we are in favor of amending the state constitution to restrict the state's use of eminent domain. The libertarian preference, of course, would be not to allow the state to take the property at all, period. But restricting use of eminent domain.
Brian, you bring up an important question there. Philosophically, if something repeals, draws back the restrictions, but still puts a new burden on us, though it could be a lighter burden, do we support that? Do we lobby for it?
Yes, we're a political party. We operate in a continuum of politics.
In the construct of
Coffee alone was better.
Because a lot of us tend to want to burn it down, the anarchists amongst us.
We would need a catastrophic event for that to happen.
A lot of us want to burn it down from day one. And be like, we're not happy with the legislative piece.
I would say, with all due respect, if you want to burn it down, then you're in the wrong group. That's not going to win us any elections, and it's almost counterproductive.
You hear that, everybody?
Now, that's not to say that we can't set a few fires here.
Right.
You know,
We're gonna smoke about it.
you know, and we should not let the old phrases. We don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If we can take a step in the right direction, yeah, there should be any cap on witchcraft laws. They shouldn't be required to do anything about who they can speak. That's me. But in order to get there, we have to start here. If you listen to On the Direction, there are libertarians who think that if it doesn't abolish it, we don't want to talk about it, and that's a great position to take, but it's not going to get any votes.
But that was a lot of the criticism of Gary Johnson this season, was that he doesn't go far enough. He's not far enough. He's not far enough.
No,
We have to be elected before we can do anything.
Right.
So let's get elected.
well, we have to be heard before we can do it. And if we start out by saying we're going to abolish, if we start out by scaring the crap out of people, we're not going to. They're going to turn us off.
Are you open for questions now?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
been open for questions.
Brian is open for questions
I've
now.
been open for questions as we start.
Okay, just checking. I did have a comment on Al's question about why we care about gerrymandering. My sense is that you were asking the question in more of a tactical and a philosophical way. I mean, you don't disagree with the philosophy that it's a bad thing, but how does it help us to fight it? I would say that tactically, it's kind of a question as to whether we're better off in an unbalanced district or a balanced district. People argue both ways. I do think that getting to the point where you can potentially make the difference between the two candidates, like David did when he ran against Cynthia Ball and Gary Pendleton, the incumbent, he had more votes than the difference between those two. To me, I think that has some weight in terms of being able to go and say, okay, you better pay attention to our issues, because there's a lot of voters out there that you could potentially get. From a tactical point of view, from a strategic point of view, to Brian's point, I think it's clearly, he said a couple of times, we have to redress the state of the North Carolina General Assembly is so dysfunctional. Clearly, if we get to the point where we can elect one or two people to the General Assembly, it would be much better if it were a balanced General Assembly than if it were all one-sided, because then we potentially could have the balance of power on some issues, and that would give us a tremendous amount of leverage. So from that point of view, a non-gerrymandered district, competitive districts are better for us strategically. So now I did have a question about that, and I'm wondering, this is a little bit off the topic of lobbying, but are you familiar with the Wisconsin case, the gerrymandering case that's going to the Supreme Court? So if anyone is familiar with it, I just read a cursory report on this, but it sounds really interesting. So if anybody knows more than I'm about to say, please speak up. But my understanding basically is that the Supreme Court has had several cases on gerrymandering, and they have really indicated in their opinions, the various justices that are there now, that they do believe that, in theory, political gerrymandering is bad and shouldn't be allowed. The problem is they've never ruled against it in any case. And the reason they've never ruled against it in any case is because it's really hard to identify what is political gerrymandering or what is unacceptable political gerrymandering. What's interesting about this Wisconsin case, there's two things that are interesting about it. The first thing is, from a legal point of view, the people that are suing have actually put forward a theory as to what is unacceptable political gerrymandering. They've taken this concept of wasted votes and analyzed how many votes beyond what it takes to win the winner gets and how many votes are for the loser, and looked at that mathematically and determined what an average is. And they've come up with a percentage, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, that if you have more wasted votes in a district consistently than the norm beyond a certain point, then that constitutes an inappropriately politically gerrymandered district. And they won their case before a part of the appeals court. And normally the next step would be to go to the full appeals court for a ruling. But there's this is the second interesting thing about this case, there's some arcane rule under which it has to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has to accept it. They can't say that they're not going to look at it. And apparently that's the case in this particular legal suit. So the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on this, and from the analysis I read, said that Justice Kennedy is probably the swing vote. He's always believed that it's bad, but he's never been able to actually vote against it because there was no way he could figure out how to prove it was bad, or in this particular case, it constituted bad. In this Wisconsin case, he may get that opportunity. So that's something to keep in mind.
Now that you mentioned it, I did read something about that.
And it may have replications for our lobbying in the sense that if we're looking for a definition of what is bad,
but
we could.
90% of the General Assembly seats were won by 10% or more. So
Right.
90% of the races have wasted votes.
Right. Well, you always have wasted votes. The question is how big a number is it compared to the average? Okay, so now I have a strategic question for you, which is, with respect to lobbying, at what point do you think the Libertarian Party will get to an area where we need to have some kind of a professional presence in terms of lobbying in the General Assembly, if ever? I mean,
Not my lifetime.
we're not that close. Do we need to elect somebody first, or can a lobbyist predate, come before we elect someone?
Well, I mean, we don't. I'm talking about the Democratic and Republican parties don't hire lobbyists. The special interest groups hire lobbyists. So what we need to do is have, when something comes up, we need to be able to mobilize a crowd essentially to show up and knock on doors, visit offices. I mean, I don't think the party itself would ever be in a position of hiring a lobbyist. I would be opposed to hiring a lobbyist. Yeah, we need to elect people with office.
The most effective form, I've been reading a lot of articles on how to make the most impact, and one of the most impactful ways is organizing call campaigns, flooding specific offices with calls over a day or a 2-day period, just continuously getting. So that's one of the most effective ways, because you're not just tying up the representative, you're tying up the staff. So it makes a very big impact on how that representative understands who's calling you or who's getting in touch with you.
We can leverage. We're not big in numbers. What we have is hopefully have enthusiasm. So we can leverage that enthusiasm by working with groups that we have an agreement on. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going to be working with End Gerrymandering Now as an organization, we need to accept their premise and not try to impose ours. So if we can bring troops to the battle, they know that we're a force to be reckoned as opposed. I say, even with gun rights, we can bring a force to bear and show up with these bodies.
Do we know how many people are coming on March 1st?
No idea.
I assume what you are doing now is not lobbying, but just have a name. Bring to this group ideas about what we should be pressuring the legislature to do. A lobbyist might do that, among other things, although I think lobbyists are not.
Well, lobbying and being a lobbyist are not the same thing. We're lobbying. We're gonna get a bunch of people. We're gonna go to the General Assembly. We're gonna go from room to room and say, we'll be End Gerrymandering Now, we want to fix this system. So that's lobbying.
So what you're doing is coordinating lobbying.
What I'm trying to just get people around this table who live in Wake County to take the day off and go and join this group.
The question whether we should hire a lobbyist, I can see a time coming when hiring a coordinator or somebody more with at least get a volunteer who put a lot of time in. what you're doing might be valuable even if it's not.
Well, we would, yeah, other state parties have either the political director, that's part of his or her job, or this is a legislative liaison person. There's different models, yeah, but that would be, yeah, right.
Yeah, but the reality of being a lobbyist, not only have to pay the lobbyists, you have to pay the lobbyists, and pay the legislators.
Yeah, well, political parties don't have lobbyists. We have staff. We may work with lobbyists on particular issues, but we don't. But right now, we just need to get our parties. I don't care what the hell we call it. Any other questions? Great, Brad?
One other point I would like to make, or actually two other points I would like to make. The 2017 to 2018 year, and possibly the 2017-2019 year, depending on what happens with a bylaws suggestion, which we'll also be voting on. And if you're interested, I mean, I realize not many people are interested in bylaws, but there is a copy of the proposed bylaws posted on the WakeLP webpage. We will be sending out an email to remind folks that will have that link. So if you're not on the mailing list and would like to get on the mailing list, you can do that on meetup.com or on our Facebook page or on our website. So I hope that you will make time in your schedules to come out and help us pick the leaders that will move us forward. We had a great year in 2016. We have municipal elections at least in 2017. Potentially, if the court cases break correctly or incorrectly, as the case may be, we may have North Carolina General Assembly elections this year. Probably unlikely at this point, but it's not out of the question yet. And of course, there's 2018, which will be key elections, because those folks, whoever we elect to the North Carolina General Assembly in 2018, will be voting on the redistricting plan that comes out based on the 2020 census. Let's see. Actually, that would be the 2020 legislature. I take it back. It would be 2018. Then the other thing I'd like to mention is that Bobby has very generously contributed a. What is this?
Glass of beer.
Well, it's a glass of beer, but what flavor beer is it of the many possible things? He got a free glass of beer with his dinner. He doesn't drink beer, so if anyone is interested,
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. It's a Van Gogh. Speak up, and you may have this untouched glass of beer. So. Are you done recording?